Hello and welcome back to the Faith and Culture Show. I'm Catherine Camp, your hostess for the show. And this is where we dig into the difficult topics going on in our culture. We do this with a purpose. We do this to educate ourselves. And we want to have these difficult conversations with the culture around us. Because if we don't do it, someone else will. And it may not come from the perspective of love and understanding, critical thinking, and logic. So we also want to do this because we want to have deep conversations with our culture based on an eternal perspective. So today I have someone I've never had on the show before. His name is Luis Valdes. He's with the Gun Owners of America. And I'm excited to get into the conversation because he has a background that not many of us fully would understand. But I think it makes a good bigger picture for us to understand how precious it is that we're living in the United States of America, whether you were born here, naturalized here, gone through the citizenship process. This is really special, that this country. And so I'm going to bring him on in a minute, but let me read something about him right now in his bio. Luis is the Florida State Director. He's also Southeastern Regional Director and Director of Outreach for Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands for Gun Owners of America. A lifelong defender of freedom, he's a passionate firearms shooter, hunter, competitor, and collector. Many of you out there might be very interested in talking about the collections. He was born in the U.S. to Cuban immigrants who fled communism. And I hope we can talk a little bit about that. Luis knows firsthand the dangers of gun control. He dedicated 15 years to serving Florida in law enforcement, working in various roles, including projective operations in law enforcement, plainclothes investigations, school resource officer, and as a field training officer, earning multiple commendations, most notably a life-saving award. While wearing the badge, Luis fought tirelessly for the Second Amendment, even standing before the Florida Senate against the Parkland gun control bill and organizing a pro-gun rally at the Capitol, leaving law enforcement in 2020. He joined GOA full-time to champion gun rights in Florida and beyond. And so we're going to talk a lot about gun rights and why it's important for Americans to really fight for that Second Amendment. Welcome, Luis. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. And, part of my career was, it wasn't it was protective operations. But
I'm
don't
sorry.
Don't worry. It's not a problem.
Yeah. Sometimes reading through the small little print.
Yeah. I figured that's what it was. It was the tiny print. I trust me, I have the same issue. Look, before we got on camera, I was wearing my glasses, so I completely understand the issue.
Well, I was going to ask you, what is projective operations? We face that every day with all the propaganda going on. It's constantly projected on us, everything that the people that want to hurt America they accuse us of, they're out there doing it. So anyway, that's a whole different story.
Yep.
So I'm really interested about your parents. How much do you know about their flight from communism?
I know it like the back of my hand. My entire family fled Fidel Castro in 1961. I had an uncle that actually came here before 1961, after Castro took power in 59. And my uncle Mario, he actually was a key element in what became the Bay of Pigs invasion in an attempt to overthrow communism in 1961. That's why the rest of my family fled in 61. So I completely understand and know the history of what happened, the struggles my family went through. I distinctly remember the stories my parents told me. They were children when they fled, but I remember what my grandparents told me, what my aunts and uncles told me. And to this day, I still have family on the island, and sadly, some of them have been killed by the communist regime.
Wow. Do you, so how would you compare what's happening or had been happening in our culture? And there's still some undercurrents going on from bad actors. A lot of people talk about, oh, those are Marxist tactics, those are communist tactics. Are they just making things up?
They're not making things up, and the danger is it's not just Marxism and communism, it's authoritarianism as a whole. It doesn't matter whether someone is on the right or the left side of the political spectrum. If they're an authoritarianist, they will use the same tactics. They will strangle free speech. They will control people's access to arms, access to information. They will stop people from freely traveling. They will monitor and harass and completely try to control an individual. And right now, the regimes that are doing it are communist in nature, but that doesn't mean a fascist government is any different in the tactics that they would use. And that's why, as you said, as you were reading my bio, I am a champion of liberty. I don't care whether someone is fascist, communist, totalitarianist, whatever. If you challenge freedom, I will fight that. No ifs, ands, or buts. It doesn't matter. But a lot of the tactics that right now being used in the United States to disarm us, to discredit us, to silence us, are the very same tactics that regimes like Fidel Castro's communism, Nicolas Maduro and Hugo Chavez's Venezuela, East Germany, communist China, the former Soviet Union, these are all the same tactics and strategies that they've used there. And some are applying it here in the United States.
Yeah, we saw that very strongly between 2021 and 2025 up until January 20th. And there's still undercurrents of it in some areas because you can't get rid of all the bad actors. They've had years and years to build up their fighting organizations or resistance to freedom. So does this drive you because this is how you were raised? You understand what communism can do to a country, or Marxism or authoritarianism?
Very much so. As a child growing up, I listened to my grandfather. I listened to my uncles. I remember my grandfather telling me what life in Cuba was like before communism, how, he was born in a lower income family, but he worked hard, made something of himself, was able to provide for my grandmother, for my father, my padrino, my uncle, and my aunts. How, he ran a successful business, how he was basically living what is considered the American middle class life. He was living that in Cuba. And it was all taken away by Fidel Castro in a Marxist revolution. And he came to the United States with 4 kids and a wife, and he worked hard. He cleaned lobsters on the Miami River. He worked overnight jobs as a janitor. He went from being something to being nothing, and he worked hard, and he achieved the American dream again, this time in the United States, which is one of the most blessed things out there. This is the shining beacon on the hill that my family was able to fleeing totalitarianism.
Yeah.
And he was able to rebuild that lifestyle and more for our entire family. I mean, when he passed away back in the early 2000s, I remember that it was after 4 kids and my grandmother and 6 grandkids. And it was through his hard work that he was able to provide all of us, a comfortable life. And I remember as a kid having no want, no real fear while I was at my grandparents' house. It was could always open the fridge. There would always be food and snacks and ice cream and, and stuff. And we'd go, and it was always a fun Christmas, and it was always toys, and we played. And that was because he worked hard. And that's because the United States gave us that opportunity, gave my family that opportunity to bless us with that. And I remember as a kid growing up, him telling me that is what communism took away from us in Cuba, because we had those same things. And in the 90s, I had an uncle visit. And I remember I asked him, why don't you stay? Why don't you, stay permanently in the United States? And he said, if I stay, your aunt will be imprisoned, that they're holding her as a political hostage.
Because he was visiting family?
Yeah, he was visiting family through the Catholic Church. But both of them couldn't come over because the communist government knew if both of them came, they'd apply for, for political asylum in the United States. So the way the Castro regime kept people from fleeing, even if they left the island, was, okay, you can leave, your spouse stays. And if you do anything wrong, if you apply for political asylum, your spouse is being thrown in prison. So he went back, and he shortly died after that. And I'll never forget talking to him and asking that simple question as a kid, as a young teenager. Hey, Theo, why don't you stay? Why don't you stay in the United States? Because if I do, your aunt goes to prison. And that was, as a teenager, that was like just shocking. It was appalling.
Yeah.
And my uncle Mario, who I told you about, that he was a contributing member of Brigada 2506, the Bay of Pigs invasion. I remember as a kid growing up and visiting him in Little Havana, in the Flagami area of Miami. And I remember him telling me, plain as day, armed people are free, disarmed people are slaves of the state. And he always had a little Walther PPK on him. My father always carried. He was a cop for 35 years. My grandfather always carried. My padrino always carried. And I was instilled at a very early age that what makes people free is the ability to be armed. That is the only tangible piece of freedom in our Constitution. And the Constitution doesn't grant us rights, it enumerates them. Rights that existed even before the Constitution was drafted. But freedom of religion, freedom of speech, right to be secure on your person, right to not have to self-incriminate, those are all philosophical ideas. Those are all non-tangible. You can't hold that. The right to keep and bear arms, that is physical. That is what you hold in your hand. That is what flesh can grab and hold. And that is the only tangible freedom that protects all of our other liberties, because us having the ability to freely speak our minds, to practice religion as we so wish, to gather with who we want to practice whatever business we want to file petitions of grievance against our government, whether the government likes it or not, to be free from self-incrimination, to be free from having the government intrude in our homes and our businesses and our persons and violate our civil rights. That's all kept safe by the Second Amendment and the ability to be armed. And my childhood reinforced that. Hearing the stories of the day-by-day change from 59 to 61 when Fidel Castro took over, how free enterprise was ended, how freedom of speech was sequestered, how even something as simple as television and radio changed. That was shocking to me. That was very foundational building in my childhood, and it led me to be the person that I am today as an adult. It built that solid foundation of, I will make sure that my kids will live in a country that is freer than I was born in. Never will I allow this country to fall to the same ravages of despotism that mi patria, that Cuba, fell under.
Yeah, don't you feel like we've been really challenged and come very close, or is that my imagination, to falling into that again?
No, we
in
have
America, I guess, for the first time ever.
We have, the United States has faced this challenge multiple times.
Okay.
The sweet siren song of Marxism, it's very appealing. I mean, the idea of, how it's preached of true egalitarianism, equality, there's no social class, everyone is equal. It sounds great, but it's not, because every time it has been tried everywhere, it has led to three things: inequality, misery, and death. The saying, the joke is, you could vote your way into Marxism, you have to fight your way out of it. And that is honest to God true. You could look at a number of countries that has fallen under it. Cuba, prior to 1959's revolution of Fidel Castro, was the second highest income in the Western Hemisphere. You had the United States, then you had Cuba. Cuba had a greater economy than Canada in the 1950s.
Wow.
And now Cuba is one of the lowest in the entire Western Hemisphere in the world.
This may seem very naive, but do they even try to control what you eat? I've heard that they don't even want people having farms and raising their own food.
Collectivism has been part and parcel with communism, going all the way back to the Soviet Union in the 1930s. When Stalin pushed collectivism, you had the Holodomor in Ukraine, where you had mass starvation of the kulaks, private farm owners. Under Imperial Russia, going that far back, Ukraine was the bread basket of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because you had private farms, you had private farm ownerships. And in Russia and in Ukraine, they were called kulaks. They were basically lower middle class farmers. They owned their little chunk of land. They farmed it to the best of their ability, to make a profit. And they were the bread basket of Europe. And then Stalinization came through with the Soviet Union, and then you had collectivization, and you had mass starvation. You had a literal famine go through the Soviet Union in the 1930s, and you had the Holodomor, where Ukrainians were systematically starved to death. And you had the same thing happened in communist China under Mao Zedong, with the Great Leap Forward and collectivization there. Millions of Chinese starved to death under communism. And you've had similar things happen in Cuba and in Latin America. And you've had similar situations happen in Africa. Look, Rhodesia was the breadbasket of Africa. And then you had Robert Mugabe take over in 1980. And Rhodesia became Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe went from being the breadbasket of Africa to being a net importer of food and having famine and starvation there. And you also had mass genocide there under Mugabe's regime. It's part and parcel with communism and Marxism comes massive amounts of genocide and death, whether it's intentional or it's through the simple fact that communism doesn't work and it leads to famines and starvation and genocide. It's a proven failure, no more, no less. And and in Cuba, they've tried collectivization. It failed. It has failed, and it continues to fail.
Wow. And what's disturbing to me is I feel like that there has been a slow march. Well, we all know that there's been a slow march through all of our institutions, and that's why everything's so messed up right now. But they're building during 2021 and to those 4 years. I noticed these ugly. There's no more beauty. There's very little beauty in hotel buildings going up, or they all look the same. It's like there's either a condo area with new condos or a Hampton Inn hotel. They all look the same, and they're brown or earth tones. They're ugly, and it just made me think they want everybody to live in these things, and so everybody would be equal. It would look equal. It would appear equal. There's even a new condominium complex or apartment complex that is attracting the younger professionals in their 20s and early 30s, called The Collective, near where I live. And I bet you they don't even know. The people living there, they don't even realize they're being, their minds are already being programmed to accept these ways. The collective. We saw that with the push for injections, that it was a groupthink kind of mentality. Well, we all, it's for the greater good. And not even an aspirin is recommended for everybody. Some people just can't handle that. So that's kind of, for me, scary language. So
yeah, and that all goes back to authoritarianism. Do as I say, not as I do. This mindset that permeates a number of people in government, whether it's Tallahassee, DC, Austin, Albany, New York, Sacramento in California, in our state capitals and in our national capital, you have this mindset with a certain segment of our lawmakers who they really believe that they're our better half, that they know better than we do. Look, as a husband and as a father, my wife and I know what's good for our daughter, not someone 500 miles away or 3,000 miles away. We know what's right for our daughter, and we're going to make that determination based on the research that we make. And gun control is the same thing. It's this idea that permeates that, oh no, we in the state, we know how you could defend yourself. You could just pick up a phone and we'll be there. Look, and I say this as a former cop, I try not to besmirch my brothers and sisters in blue that wear the badge. I'm a second gen cop. My father did it for 35 years. We are first responders. We show up after the fact. That's why we're responders. We're not preventers. You want to prevent crime? That's on you. You have to be armed. We show up, we draw the chalk outline, we put up the crime scene tape, we write the report, and we try to go after the perpetrator after the fact. Mm-hmm. Police, we don't stop crime. Hardly ever. What stops crime is honest men and women who take care of themselves, who take care of their community, who take care of their family. And they know that when seconds count, cops are minutes to an hour away. But you have people in government who push this idea of, oh, just call 911, the police will save you. Guess what? As we saw earlier this year at FSU, at Florida State University, very quick response by FSU PD, by the way. I tip my hat off to them. I lived in Tallahassee for 10 years. My wife worked for 10 years at FSU, so we know that campus like the back of our hand. We know a lot of people there that work there. I know some FSU cops there. So again, tip my hat off. They didn't prevent it. They responded and took the shooter into custody. But you still have people that were injured and killed. Yeah. What would have stopped the FSU shooting is if FSU wasn't a gun-free zone and faculty and students were able to carry and defend themselves. That stops crime. That stops muggings. That stops home invasions. That stops burglaries, rapes, murders. The idea of government telling me we're going to take your guns away because we're going to keep you safe? No, doesn't work that way.
Right. They're not living with you.
Living with me. Look, part of my job was protective operations. I literally was, the same thing on the state level doing what the Secret Service does. I was protecting the governor. I was protecting our elected officials. The difference is I was there with them. The general public doesn't get a protective detail. You don't have a protective detail. I don't have a protective detail. I don't have armed staff posted outside of my house keeping me safe. It's you and I keeping our families safe. So the idea that authoritarianism, that government knows best, government don't know squat. We know what's right for us. As a free people, we know what's right.
Yes, that's so true. You make some very, very good points there. What would you say, being in the gun rights, kind of, I want to say business, but it's not a business. It's kind of raising awareness. What would you say about just your local school? I mean, the arguments go back and forth that it's too dangerous to allow teachers. I know at the college level, you just said FSU, but just in your elementary school, depending on maybe if there's a security guard. I don't know what schools are like anymore. There were no security guards when I was going to school. And it was just not a thing. And I guess today it's a little bit different. So how do you address that situation with people who don't want guns in the school? And then, of course, those who have an understanding like you, well, how do you protect yourself without them?
Well, part of my career in law enforcement was being a school resource officer. I literally worked as an SRO on a number of campuses, including elementary schools. Again, it goes back to when seconds count, I could still be minutes away. Look, some of our elementary schools themselves are vast campuses, and to get from one end to another, it could still take 30 seconds to a minute and a half, depending on how big the campus is. I'm a firm believer in arming our teachers and staff. I think campus carry for our K through 12 schools is vitally important. I think our parents should be able to be armed when they pick up and drop off their kids. As we saw in instances like Uvalde, Texas, and Parkland, Florida, the cops, they waited outside. They didn't go in. You know, again, seconds count. Seconds are the difference between life and death. In Parkland, you had a coach who used his body as a human shield to protect the students under his care. What if that coach was armed and could have returned fire? Instead of him giving up his life, what if he could have prevented it? What if he could have returned fire? What if he could have fought back? What if the teachers and staff could have fought back in Uvalde? What if the teachers and staff in Sandy Hook could have fought back? I'm a father of a little girl. I drop her off every day at an elementary school. Yeah, the school has an armed security guard, one armed security guard. The campus alone has 6, 7 buildings, multiple points of entry. I mean, it's a pretty big campus for an elementary school. If I was a bad guy, I could get around that security guard. I could still cause havoc. I could still cause damage. Our teachers and staff, they should be armed. They need to be armed. And we're not saying that everyone on campus has to be armed, but if you are a teacher or you're a staff member and you want to be armed, you should have that right to be armed. If you're a parent, you definitely should have that right to be armed when it comes to picking up and dropping off your kids. Because bad things happen on the way to and from school. Yeah. You know, federal law says it's a federal gun-free school zone. Okay. State law says it's a gun-free school. It's a gun-free zone. Okay, so that means that when I leave my house from my house to pick up my kid or drop off my kid, I have to be unarmed. So what if at the stoplight that I'm stopping at between dropping her off or picking her up, I got someone that wants to carjack us? Now I'm left defenseless because I'm abiding by the law. Here's a news flash. Criminals are criminals because they break the law. They don't care. Gun-free zone doesn't stop them. Last I checked, murder's been illegal since Hammurabi carved it into a stone tablet thousands of years ago. Doesn't stop bad guys. The only thing these laws stop are the law abiding. It disarms honest people because criminals don't care and they never have.
And from your background in law enforcement, I mean, we're talking about bad guys here. I know from being married to a hunter and hunter safety instructor that many of the bad guys are getting their arms illegally anyway. Do you find that in Florida where you worked?
Yeah, bad guys don't care. You know, the idea of universal background checks would stop criminals. Laughable. Go to New York and California. They have it. Guess what? Criminals don't care. They still get guns illegally. Mandatory waiting periods doesn't stop bad guys. Background checks doesn't stop bad guys. The need to show ID doesn't stop bad guys because they're criminals. They don't care. None of this stops them. None of this has ever stopped them. We could go all the way back to the height of Prohibition when the mob was running around. It didn't stop Al Capone. It didn't stop John Dillinger. From then to now, they don't care. They're criminals. Every law that is passed only hurts the law abiding because, again, going back to law, my days as a cop, criminals are criminals because they break the law. And that's what lawmakers fail to understand. They keep trying to legislate morality as if it's going to change bad people with bad intentions. It doesn't. What changes bad people with bad intentions is we as a society, we need to collect, and this is where I use collectively in the same sense as the founders used it. We need to collectively have a discussion on why we have these certain issues. And some of these issues are very simple. We have a mental health crisis in America. We have a social stigmatization on mental health treatment. The idea of mental health is treated poorly. It's either we overly prescribe certain medications to people and think that will solve them when clearly it's not.
Right.
When a lot of this is social stigma. People seeking mental health treatment should be treated no different than if you or I go to the doctor because we have a flu. And a lot of people that have mental health crisis, it's not permanent, it's temporary. You know, people have traumatic events in their life. They have PTSD from being a cop, being a firefighter, being EMS, being in the military. You know, people come from domestic abuse situations. People have traumatic events, you know, car accidents, whatever it is. We should have more public discussion, more avenues of treatment, more ways where people aren't being ostracized for it, and they're either self-medicating through alcohol or drug abuse, or they're not seeking treatment at all. But worse, though, you have certain segments of society that are literally parading mental health issues and saying, oh, it's fine, when it's not. And that's what we as a collective society need to do. We need to sit down and have an honest conversation with ourselves and our family and our loved ones and say, Mr. and Mrs. America, we need to fix mental health in the United States. If someone is truly a danger to society, then they need to be taken off the streets. Because the idea of red flag laws, we're going to take the guns away from crazy people. Guess what? They're crazy. If they're truly a threat, they're going to carry out that threat. You know, just as we saw in Wisconsin, you had a guy jump in a car and run over people in a Christmas Day parade, for God's sakes. That needs to end. Because gun control ain't going to stop it. Taking crazy people off the street will. That'll stop it. And that's where we need to have that discussion.
Yeah.
Where if people are truly a danger, fine. We need to have the resources where those people can seek the treatment they deserve. And if people can function in society, then let them live their lives as free people with their rights intact. No more, no less.
And I've seen, you wonder, where does it end? You let them have the guns, they start taking that away. You can't defend yourself. Then I'm watching this in Australia. You know, they no one's allowed to have a gun. Now, no one's allowed to have a knife. I'm thinking, are you kidding me? What is it? Is it next you can't have forks? And the next thing, you can't have sticks? You can't pick up sticks? Because crazy people and bad people are going to find a way to hurt someone else, one way or the other. So where does it end? And then the government has full control of you if you're totally depending on them for everything. And then that's when they can actually control you and enslave you. And that's what I see as the ultimate end, because we've seen that before. So that's a real danger too. And you touched on the fact that being able to protect yourself at all times. So what do you think? Obviously, you're for concealed carry. So tell us a little bit about that, how that would work and the benefits of that.
Well, it's real simple. Americans should be able to carry an arm anywhere in the United States. The idea, we're pushing for full reciprocity for carry rights. So it doesn't matter where you live and what jurisdiction you're crossing into. As an American, your rights don't end at an imaginary line that is a jurisdictional border. Whether you're crossing from one state to another or one city to another, or going into Washington, D.C., whatever. Your rights exist, and these rights are enumerated by the Constitution. Again, I want to emphasize this. The Constitution doesn't grant you your rights. The Constitution enumerates rights. The Founding Fathers completely understood when they drafted it that these rights are inalienable. They are God-given. They existed long before the foundation of our country was even an idea. And it's very simple. Whether you want to do a road trip from New York City to LA and everywhere in between, you should be able to carry a firearm for your own self-defense and the defense of your loved one and your family. And it's been proven in states that have liberalized their carry laws, crime rates have plummeted. And it's very simple because criminals are predators. Scumbags are predators. It's no different than watching the lion hunt the zebra on the plains of Africa. They go after the weak, they go after the elderly, they go after the slow, they go after the sick. Criminals are the same way. They want an easy target. That's why all of these mass shooters usually go to places that are gun-free zones, because they know their victims are disarmed. That's why you have high crime rates in places like Los Angeles and New York City and Chicago, because you have gun control being enforced there, where it's much harder for people to legally own and carry firearms. So the criminals there know, hey, I have a higher probability that my victim's going to be disarmed. Great. You go to places where you have permitless constitutional carry, whether it's open or concealed. Guess what? Criminals are like, I don't want to touch this. I don't want to get shot. And that's the mindset. That's what it comes down to. You know, we're talking about an inalienable right. The zebra in Africa doesn't ask some higher authority, can I kick the lion in the face to keep myself and my calf safe? No. The zebra kicks the lion in the face. I shouldn't ask some higher authority in government, hey, I want to protect my wife, myself, and my kid from some scumbag trying to break into my house at 3 a.m, or someone holding us up on the streets after we leave the movie theaters. It should be able to, you know what, I want to protect my family, I'm going to protect my family. The end. And again, going back to the idea of law enforcement and government, look, you had a U.S. Supreme Court case, Warren v. DC, where a couple of women their apartment was burglarized and they were brutally raped for hours on end. And one of them managed to call 911, and DC police showed up. There was no signs of forced entry. The women were told to be kept quiet or they would have been murdered, so they didn't yell out for help. You know, the cops looked, couldn't find signs of forced entry. They didn't hear anything. They didn't see anything. They left. Those victims, you know, once this ordeal was over, they sued the police. And the Supreme Court said law enforcement has the duty to protect society as a whole, not as an individual. If you slip through the cracks, so sorry, too bad, so sad, not our problem.
Oh my goodness.
And that means that is up to you. Your self-defense is ultimately your responsibility. So anytime anyone in government, any lawmaker, any bureaucrat says, we are going to enforce gun control, but we're going to give you law enforcement, it doesn't matter. Because when seconds count, cops are minutes to an hour away, and sometimes they never show up. That's why carrying a firearm is important. That's why concealed carry and open carry is important. And we're a firm belief in open carry sometimes. Look, my wife is a real estate agent. If she shows a house towards the evening, or she's meeting a client in a sketchy part of town, sometimes open carrying is what keeps her safe. You know, it's no different than the rattlesnake. Sometimes that rattlesnake, you know, wags his little tail, sends that signal saying, don't mess with me, I'll bite you. That's what open carry sends sometimes. Concealed carry is useful too. You know, it's basically saying, hey, I could be poisonous, I could not be. Don't mess with me. But that's what it is. And that's what people fail to realize. Just because as a society, you know, we're jovial, we're friendly, we're trusting. Humanity is no different than any other critter in the animal kingdom. We are a violent, territorial, hierarchical species. We are predatory in nature. We're carnivores. And that predator instinct is still in our genes, in our psyche, and you see it in our society. You see it with criminals, you see it with rapists, you see it with muggers, you see it with burglars. They are reacting to that primal predatory state, and they're looking for soft targets. They're looking for easy prey. And that's why we need to carry. That's why we need to be armed. And that's why we need to liberalize our self-defense laws so everyone gets the benefit from the idea of the herd. Hey, not everyone in the herd might be packing, but that predator doesn't know who in the herd is packing.
That's right. That's right. And it's a benefit to everyone when that happens. So, all right. So how can people get involved? You have, obviously, do you speak at organizations to raise awareness for this? How do you all get the word out?
So Gun Owners of America, we're the only no compromise gun rights organization in Washington, D.C. and on our state capitals across the country.
Okay.
We do grassroots activism. We do lobbying efforts. If people go to our website, gunowners.org, we have up-to-the-date information and calls to action on how to get involved politically. Like just today, they voted 51-50 on the big, beautiful bill. One of the provisions in that bill was liberalization of gun control that has been in existence for close to a century. The National Firearms Act has placed an unlawful, unconstitutional tax on certain firearms and accessories for close to a century now. And we were pushing for full repeal, but lawmakers in Congress and the unelected parliamentarian ruled that it wasn't germane to the budget, so they stripped it only to where the tax went from $200 per item to $0, but all of the hurdles are still there. So, of course, we're going to be fighting this tooth and nail. We're going to try to outright fully repeal it, the National Firearms Act, because there shouldn't be a tax. You shouldn't have to give your information. You shouldn't have to do a thumbprint. You shouldn't have to ask the government for permission to own a certain firearm or an accessory. But that's just an example of right now what's going on. Across the country, we have lawsuits in California, New York, Illinois, Florida, Tennessee, Missouri, you name it. I mean, I literally don't have the list because the list is that long, I can't memorize it. But we're challenging New York's gun-free zones. We're challenging Florida's open carry ban and under 21 purchase ban. We're challenging Illinois' magazine capacity and firearms ban. We're challenging California's gun control. We're looking at challenging gun control in New Jersey and elsewhere. It's that. And in terms of our lobbying and grassroots activism, we do whistle-stop tours. We do educational events. We even have a national event going on August 9th and 10th in Knoxville, Tennessee. We're doing Goals, our Gun Owners Advocacy and Leadership Summit. It's a 2-day event where you're going to have presentations and speakers informing and educating our membership on how to get involved politically on the grassroots level for gun rights, on how to fight gun control, the history of gun control, how especially in many parts of the country, it's rooted in Jim Crow bigotry and racism. So we do this across the board. And of course, we also do what we call gun owner lobby days, where at our state capitals, we organize gun owners to have lobby days to petition their lawmakers to repeal gun control and promote and advance pro-gun legislation.
So can they find all of this information on that website?
Yep, they can go to gunowners.org, and we have up-to-the-date information on everything we do, from our press releases and our legal challenges to our calls to action for our membership on how to get involved politically, on how to get in touch with lawmakers. And also, of course, we have information on all the different events that we do and all the different events that we speak at and educate at. So, yeah, gunowners.org is the best way to do it. And the beautiful thing is membership is only $25 a year. And I can tell you this, look, I spend more than $25 when we go through drive-through at Burger King to get myself, my kid, and my wife a meal when we're too lazy to cook. So $25 goes a long way to fighting the good fight.
Yeah, that does. Well, I'm glad to hear that you have educational series on that, because a lot of people don't even know where to start. But if they can just go to gunowners.org and start looking. Now, are all of your educational pieces live, or are they kind of like a series that they can watch on videos?
It really depends. Some of it is live events. Some of it is educational. We have a lot of educational programming too, for what's going on politically and legislatively. We have a couple of different shows like the Minuteman Moment, which is a general kind of news type program that gives you up to the date information of, hey, this is what's going on legislatively and politically or legally with certain cases. We have another show called One in the Chamber, which is more focused on our grassroots activism. We're even looking at, we have outreach programs like our 2A Defenders, which is to educate our young gun owners, especially our young college-age gun owners. So we have a lot of different educational programs out there, and there's a lot more coming down the pipeline. Some of it, which we're excited to announce at this year's Goals in Knoxville. So we got a lot more outreach stuff coming out, and we're excited to announce it at Goals. But
well, if somebody,
I want to be a little tight-lipped on it because it's a surprise.
Oh, okay.
But we got some stuff. We got some good announcements coming out of Goals this year in Knoxville on more outreach and educational stuff, and people are going to love it.
Well, Tennessee is an awesome place to do a vacation. So if there are some families out there looking for something fun to do, and educational and patriotic, is there a flyer out, or is this something also listed under what tab would they find it on gunowners.org?
It's right on gunowners.org, and also if they want, Goals has its own website. Easiest way to find that is you can just Google GOA Goals 2025, and the first link will take you straight to that. But of course, we have the same link on our main website, gunowners.org. And, through all of our social media campaigning on X, on Instagram, on Facebook, of course, we're promoting Goals too. So,
okay,
we're pushing it big time. Some of the biggest manufacturers are going to be there. You're going to have Taurus, you're going to have Glock, you're going to have, I'm trying to remember now. Oh, the name just forgot me. It's one of the bigger AR manufacturers. I mean, it's going to be a fun 2-day event. And the beautiful thing is it's open to members. So if you're a member, you don't have to pay a penny to get in. If you're not a member, join up, then you come in. That's what makes it fantastic.
Is there going to be, is it kind of like a gun show where people can look and purchase?
So there will be manufacturers and there will be vendors there. In terms of firearm sales, that due to federal law, that has to go through an FFL. But there's definitely going to be a number of accessory vendors there, and the manufacturers that we will have there, they will be showing off their latest and greatest products. So people will be able to get a hands-on experience, to see, all the new stuff coming out from all the different manufacturers. They could buy holsters, they could buy cleaning kits, they could buy accessories, and nothing says if a certain manufacturer's there that you can't place an order with them and then they can't ship it to your dealer of choice for pickup. So there's always, the beautiful thing about our show is it's not just an exhibition, it's also a sales show. So if you want to buy something, you can. And look, as someone who has worked trade shows, it's always easier to pack up the booth when half the stuff got sold to someone and they're happy with it. It makes it easier on our end.
Yeah. Yeah. So now I know that there are more and more women also learning how to shoot and arming themselves. So with the holsters and products that, is there a women section?
There is actually going to be a specific event just for women. I wish I had the cards in front of me to specifically read it, but it's going to be a specific event at Goals just for women, put on by women, about the Second Amendment, about caring for women. Because as a firearms instructor, I could tell you this, my wife is also a firearms instructor. It's a lot easier for me to carry a gun concealed than it is for a woman, just because of clothing styles.
Yep.
And that's actually going to be one of the things that's going to be put on at Goals at our women's specific event. We're actually going to have models demonstrating the different ways for women to carry and showing off some of the latest holsters and accessories. But overall, women are one of the largest growing segment of new shooters in the country. And as an instructor, I love it for two reasons. One, women don't come into the class with this machismo attitude of, I don't know what I'm doing, when clearly the shooter doesn't. They come in with this open mindset of, hey, I'm here to learn. And the beautiful thing is, the second part of it is, they learn quick. I'm not there spending half a day on the range like, bro, your grip's wrong. You're doing this wrong. You know, with female shooters, you know, we instruct them. My wife and I instruct them. It's like, oh, I did this. Okay, let me shift. And they're right on target. It's fantastic. I mean, it's great. And the beautiful thing about it also, and this is more on the liberty side, you have a lot of people in government that always push gun control. Well, it's to keep women safe. Hey, you know, the best way for women to keep themselves safe is to carry, because the best thing that stops that domestic abuser from beating on them is when that former victim draws down and says, I ain't going to be a victim anymore. That's the difference.
Yeah.
You know, the old saying says, God created man, Samuel Colt made him equal. Well, guess what? When you have, for your viewers that don't know, Samuel Colt was the guy who started Colt Firearms way back in the 1830s, 1840s.
Yeah.
So that's the old saying with that. But the real truth to that is disparity of force. You could have a guy who's 6'2", 250-pound muscle, you know, jacked up muscle builder, gym rat, abusing my wife who is 5'2", 110 pounds, but my wife is armed. She draws down, that disparity of force suddenly equals. That's true egalitarianism. That's true equality.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, my wife doesn't have to worry about, oh, can I punch? Can I kick? My wife is like, okay, you want to try to harass me? You want to try to go after me or my kid? Here's my Mama Bear Claws. It's made by Smith & Wesson. It's made by Glock. It's made by Sig Sauer. It's made by Agent K. Good luck with that.
I like that attitude. Well, like you mentioned at the very beginning of this interview, you know, without the Second Amendment, we don't have the First Amendment. And therefore, our freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all of that just goes down the drain. So we have to fight to keep our freedoms. And I think this country's been asleep for a long time. Many people, not everybody, not people like you, you've been aware because of your family background, but the majority of Americans have no idea what it's like to be in a communist country. You know, that the young millennials have these pipe dreams about socialism and how great, how equity. No, equity is a race to the bottom. Our country it gives people the same equality to get ahead, to work. Like you said, your father was given the opportunity to grow. And it was all in his sweat equity that he built something for your family and made you comfortable. Are there any last words? I'm very excited. I might even go to the Knoxville,
you know,
I guess, show.
Yeah. So two things. One, the American dream, the true thing of the American dream about equality and egalitarianism is that everyone is equal in the sense that you have the ability to try. And what makes the American dream truly fantastic is if you fail, you could try again. That's what the American dream is about. That's what true equality is. It doesn't mean that everyone is equal financially or materially. It's that everyone is equal in the sense that they could try to raise their level to whatever commensurate level they wish to be at. And if you fail, you could try again. That is what people fail to understand. That's what Marxism fails at. The idea that you could push equality through government. No. True equality is you and I have access to the same abilities and the same resources. And the only difference is how much blood, sweat, and tear you want to put into it versus me. And the other thing is, you know, a lot of people really disparage younger millennials and Gen Zers. I'm seeing the opposite. You're talking about people that grew up and came of age in the 2000s. They're digital natives. They completely understand how to navigate the digital environment and truly seek truth and facts. And at the same time, they're extremely distrustful of government. You're talking about a generation of young adults who came of age with the lies and failures of the Obama administration, the Biden administration, the pandemic, the elections, the Great Recession, all of that. And they have this distrust of government, especially seeing how they know how to get all the facts. And the really amazing thing is the younger generation, I really think that as they come of age and they become adults, the siren swan song of Marxism and socialism, it ain't preaching, it ain't getting to them. They're not listening to it. A lot of them are really industrious. They have this entrepreneurial spirit.
I've seen that.
They have this go-getting attitude, both in how they want to live their lives. And, is it different? Yeah. A lot of them aren't as materialistic. They want to experience life more than just have the 3-2 with the white picket fence and the 2-car garage. And I get that. Hey, they're in their early 20s. They want to experience life. Good, go do that.
Yeah.
But they are doing it in a way through entrepreneurship where they're funding a lifestyle that when I was in my 20s, I definitely didn't have it. And I congratulate them on that. And I really think that we are on the cusp of a generational change where all of these young adults that everyone disparages and says, they're lazy, they don't have work ethic. They're doing things that I never would have thought of as a business opportunity, and they're being successful at it. So I really think that as our country progresses into the century, the American dream isn't diminishing, it's changing, but it's growing. And that's what it is. Going back 100 years, going back 200 years, we have always had this societal change and growth, and some of it has been, rife with conflict. But we have always, in the end, moved more towards freedom and liberty. If you told me 30 years ago as a gun owner that the Clinton assault weapons ban would have expired, that the Supreme Court would have ruled multiple times that now owning a firearm is an inalienable God-given individual right, that over half the country is permitless in one form or another for concealed carrying of a firearm, that we have a Justice Department now issuing briefs to gun right cases where they're saying, yes, the government is wrong, we have been wrong, and people do have these rights and freedoms. I would have thought it was crazy. I would have been like, get out of town. And you know what? We have advanced so much in freedom in the last couple of years, especially the last decade, on gun rights. Yes, it's a fight. It's a hard-fought fight, and certain states are clawing tooth and nail to keep their gun control on the books. But we are winning. We are on the offensive. We are no longer on the defensive. And a lot of that has to do with the younger generation becoming politically involved, becoming politically active, and throwing the blinders off that previous generations had in this utmost belief that government will always do good for me. Look, government ain't there to be your friend. Ronald Reagan said it best. The worst things to hear is I'm from the government and I'm here to help. No, yeah. Take this from someone who's worked for the government. The government doesn't have your best interest at heart. The government has its own interest at heart. And like every institution, it wants to keep whatever power it can. And freedom is a threat to that power. And the American people have this ingrained desire for freedom and liberty. And it's a burning passion that I see coming everywhere. And it doesn't matter whether you could trace your ancestry back to the Mayflower or you came off the boat last week legally. Guess what? People that come to America and they want to partake of the American dream, they have that burning desire for freedom. And that burning desire for freedom is the right to keep and bear arms, because that's what keeps it all intact.
Yes. Oh, what a great way to finish this session. This is so true. And I have seen that in the younger 20s, but there's like a cutoff that I've seen. Some of the older 20s who they're the tail end of that. Oh, socialism is the way to go. It's like, no, just watch what's happening and learn. That's good. Thank you so much, Louise, for that. So much knowledge there on these issues that people are afraid to touch, and they shouldn't be, because this is our right to protect ourselves, and that's part of being an American.
That's what being an American is all about. For some of these people, hey, the old saying, you lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Some are just a little more hard-headed than others. Don't worry, the school of hard knocks will teach them.
Yeah, that's what I think too. So tell us one more time where they can get all the information on this upcoming show in Knoxville, and maybe even learning how to get involved in their own town, in their own counties, and make a difference.
So again, real simple. It's just gunowners.org. Again, that's gunowners.org. And if people want to follow me on social media, it's Real FL Gun Lobby. Again, that's Real FL Gun Lobby. And our event in Knoxville, Tennessee is August 9th and 10th. It's called Goals, Gun Owners of America's Gun Owners Advocacy and Leadership Summit. Again, that's August 9th and 10th in Knoxville. So look forward to possibly seeing you there. Trust me, I'll be working the show floor, running around like a chicken with my head cut off, making sure everything's going right. But it's going to be a fun event.
It sounds like it. Thank you again. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you.